I was 19, freshly celebrating another year of questionable decisions, and out with my usual crew, Zach, Danny, and Mikey. The night was already a blur of cheap vodka, cigarette smoke, and the kind of confidence that only comes from being young and reckless. Zach's beat-up Honda Civic rattled as we cruised through town, passing a bottle between us, music blaring. The night air felt electric, and in our drunken haze, we thought we owned the streets. We parked near the old railroad tracks, a known spot where no one would bother us. We killed time the way we always did, bullshitting, passing smokes, and arguing about the dumbest things. It was one of those nights that felt endless, but the buzz eventually gave way to hunger. "Yo, let's hit up Burger King," Danny slurred, patting his stomach. "I need some fries in my life." "Bet," Zach said, already turning the key in the ignition. We pulled into the Burger King parking lot only to find the drive-thru closed. "Ah, come on," Mikey groaned. "What kind of bullshit is this?" "Inside it is," I muttered, shoving the car door open. The second we stepped in, we were greeted by chaos. At the front of the line stood a woman, big, loud, and furious. Her voice echoed through the near-empty restaurant as she waved a greasy paper bag in the air, ranting at the poor kid behind the counter. "What is this? I said no pickles. How hard is that?" she shrieked. The employees looked drained, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and silent pleading. The line had stalled for what must have been 10 minutes, and the growing frustration in the room was palpable. "She's been at it forever," Mikey whispered, barely suppressing a laugh. "I swear she's gonna pop a blood vessel." I don't know if it was the booze, the hunger, or just the stupid thrill of making my friends laugh, but something in me snapped. When the woman finally huffed and stepped aside to wait for her corrected order, I swaggered up to the counter, feeling invincible. "May I apologize on behalf of humanity?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "for the irate snuffling of my heavy friend here." Silence. The cashier froze, mouth slightly open. The people in line just stared. Even my friends, who usually hyped up my bullshit, gave nervous chuckles, eyes darting between me and the woman. I turned my head just in time to see her face flush deep red. I braced myself for an explosion, some kind of retort, but nothing. She just smiled. A slow, knowing, smug smile. Then, she pulled out her phone and started typing. That should have been my first warning. We got our food and sat at the far end of the restaurant, still chuckling about what had just happened. But I kept glancing at her. She wasn't eating. She was just on her phone, talking in hushed tones, stealing glances at me. "Bro, she's plotting your death," Zach joked. I shrugged it off. The more we ate, the less funny it all seemed. That smug smile stayed glued to her face, and every now and then, her eyes flicked to mine as if she was waiting for something. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I was wrong. We finally headed out, the night air cool against my flushed skin, and then, "That one, right there." The voice sent a bolt of cold fear through my chest. I turned. She was standing near the door, pointing directly at me, and then I turned back just in time to see a gun aimed straight at my face. Everything stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The man holding the gun was huge, a grizzled guy with a hard face and anger burning in his eyes. The realization hit me like a truck. This was her husband. He was yelling, his words a blur of rage, but all I could focus on was the barrel of the gun, black and impossibly huge, aimed right between my eyes. I could feel my legs shaking. He shoved the barrel against my forehead. "Get on your knees," he growled. "You don't deserve to die on your feet." I collapsed. Not even a controlled descent. I fell. And then, a sudden warmth spread down my leg. I'd pissed myself. My breath hitched in my throat. I wanted to cry, beg, anything, but my voice wouldn't work. I waited for the shot. Waited for that quick, painless blackness. But instead, I heard whispers. From behind me. "Cops." The word cut through the moment like a knife. I heard the woman repeat it, but this time, She sounded scared. And then, the gun was gone. When I dared to look up, I saw them bolting, her and her husband jumping into a car, tires screeching as they sped off. And then, the distant wail of sirens. I sucked in a breath, my whole body trembling. I was alive. The cops arrived minutes later, too late to do anything but take my statement. And my friends? Gone. They had ditched me the second things went south, leaving me there, alone, shaking, soaked in piss, in the middle of the Burger King parking lot. So I got a ride home in the back of a police car, which of course meant my parents found out about the drinking. They grounded me for a month, though honestly, I didn't even leave the house for a week. I barely ate, barely slept. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that barrel. I heard his words. You don't deserve to die on your feet. I don't know where they went, if they were ever caught. I never saw them again. But I learned something that night. You never know who you're messing with. And sometimes, the joke isn't worth it. I never thought a job at Burger King would teach me how fast a person could act when it truly mattered. But that summer afternoon, as the scent of sizzling patties mixed with the sweat of a lunch rush, I learned something horrifying. Sometimes, you don't get a second chance to think. I was 23, juggling night school and a shift manager position at a Burger King tucked into a large shopping center. It wasn't a dream job, but it paid rent, kept my fridge stocked, and gave me a semblance of control over my life. The restaurant sat next to a massive superstore, the kind that had everything from groceries to auto parts. We shared a parking lot with them, which was both a blessing and a curse. Customers often wandered over after shopping, but we also had to deal with their messes, their weirdos, and their corporate nonsense. The store's general manager was an absolute nightmare, a petty tyrant who ran his place with an iron fist but couldn't be bothered to handle real problems. Case in point. For the past week, a fire ant infestation had been festering in one of the parking lot's decorative islands. Those pointless patches of soil meant to make concrete look less like concrete. Customers had complained, my team had reported it, and I had personally called the store's manager. His response? Not my problem, kid. And that was that. The warning signs. The lunch rush was in full swing. Grease hissed on the grills, the soda machines gurgled, and the front counter buzzed with customers placing orders. It was the usual chaos, but nothing I couldn't handle. I spotted a woman with 3 kids stepping up to the counter. She looked about mid-30s, pleasant but tired, the kind of tired that came from wrangling kids all day. 1 Whopper meal and 3 kids' meals, she said with a small smile, handing over her card. I punched in the order and returned her smile. Coming right up. She took the tray and her kids, 2 girls, 1 boy, happily bounced out the door. It should have been just another forgettable transaction. But 10 minutes later she was back. And she wasn't smiling. She burst into the restaurant like a storm, her face blotchy and wet with tears. Her hands shook as she clutched the counter, gasping like she had run all the way here. Help! My son! Fire ants! They're all over him! For a second I froze. Fire ants. My brain struggled to process her words, but when I saw the raw terror in her eyes, the meaning slammed into me. The nest. I vaulted over the counter without a word and sprinted outside. I spotted them immediately. The 2 little girls were standing on the hood of their car, eyes wide, hands covering their mouths. The boy, he was on the ground, screaming, flailing, clawing at his legs. And I saw why. His legs were moving. Not because he was, but because something else was crawling all over them. A swarm of fire ants. I had never seen anything like it in real life. Tiny black and orange bodies, hundreds of them, scurrying up his calves, biting, stinging. His bare skin was already erupting in red, angry welts. His tiny hands slapped at them uselessly, making it worse. I had to act fast. A memory hit me. When I was a kid, my dad had saved my cousin from the same nightmare with a garden hose, but the restaurant hose was too far away. Then I saw the drinks, the ones the family had just bought. A tray of large sodas sat abandoned on the car's hood. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the largest one, ripped the lid off, and slammed the freezing liquid onto the kid's legs. He shrieked, but I could already see ants washing away, their tiny bodies tumbling onto the pavement. Next drink. More splashes. Third drink. Gone. Most of the ants were off. I dropped to my knees, yanked off my gloves, and frantically swiped away the stragglers, ignoring the sharp bites on my own hands. It worked. The boy was still crying, but the worst of the swarm was gone. I turned to the mother. Bring him inside. Now. She didn't hesitate. Scooping him up, she ran toward the restaurant, the girls trailing behind. Inside, I grabbed the first aid kit, yanked out the burn cream, and started smearing it on his swollen, bitten legs. The kitchen went silent, every employee, every customer just watching. Then someone finally spoke. Jesus Christ, what happened? I barely registered the question. My hands were shaking, but I kept working, kept applying cool compresses, kept whispering reassurances to the sobbing kid. Someone called 911. The ambulance arrived within 5 minutes. The moment the paramedics took over, I stepped back, exhausted, drenched in soda and still trembling. The mother turned to me, her face streaked with fresh tears. But this time she wasn't afraid. She hugged me, clutching me so tight I almost lost my breath. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved him." The next day we learned that the store manager had been sued. The ants? They had been reported for over a week, documented complaints, ignored emails, warnings from employees. Corporate didn't take it well. Within 24 hours the manager was fired. By the end of the week, a team of exterminators showed up. The nest was eradicated. I quit a month later. Not because of this incident, at least that's what I told myself. But some nights I still hear that kid's screams. I still see his tiny legs, crawling with fire ants, his face twisted in agony. And I still remember the feeling. That terrifying moment when I realized that if I hadn't acted fast enough, he could have died. And that's something you don't forget. I've worked at plenty of fast food places over the years, but this Burger King, the one right off the highway, has a way of attracting the worst kind of people after dark. I don't just mean drunks or junkies. I mean the kind of people who make your skin crawl, the ones who come in looking normal enough but leave you feeling like you brushed up against something wrong. I started here about 8 months ago, mostly working the evening shifts. I won't say I love it, but it pays the bills. And my manager Pete doesn't breathe down my neck as long as I keep the line moving. Most nights are the same. Rush hour from 5 to 7, then a slow decline in customers until we lock the doors at 10. Then it's a mad dash to clean up so we can punch out before corporate screws us out of overtime. That night, though, that night still sits with me. It was a Wednesday, which meant we were understaffed. It was just me on the register, Carlos in the kitchen, and Pete handling the drive-thru. The last stretch of the night is usually slow, but this time we got hit with a wave of late orders. A group of teenagers loitering by the soda machine, a guy in a suit scrolling through his phone while waiting for his takeout, and an old man who kept asking for napkins one at a time. I was already eyeing the clock, thinking about how fast I could mop the floor and get the hell out, when I saw them. The doors pushed open wide, both of them, even though one would have been enough. The guy walked in first, tall, wiry, wearing a windbreaker that looked too thin for the cold outside. He had this dead-eyed look, the kind that made you want to avoid making eye contact. And behind him, she rolled in on a mobility scooter. Now, I've seen plenty of people use scooters, but something about her made my stomach twist. She wasn't just big, she was massive, spilling over the edges of the seat, her skin pale and blotchy under the fluorescent lights. A plastic oxygen tube looped around her ears, feeding into her nostrils, but it didn't seem to be doing much good. She was breathing heavy, wheezing even, her lips wet like she'd just finished eating. She didn't say a word, just smiled at the guy as he walked up to the counter. "Hey, man," he said, voice flat. "Let me get He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and read off a list of food. Not a normal order either. A huge order. "That's gonna take a bit," I said, punching it in. "That's fine," he replied. He turned back to her, and the way she was looking at him, it made my skin crawl, like she was waiting for something. Carlos poked his head out from the kitchen. "Dude, are they serious?" he whispered. "Yeah," I muttered. "Just start making it." I rang them up. $138.79. And the guy paid in cash. A fat stack of wrinkled 20s, like he'd been carrying them around for weeks. The whole time, the woman never stopped staring at him. Not at the menu, not at her food. Just at him. Something about it made my stomach twist. It took almost 20 minutes to get everything bagged up. In that time, the dining room emptied out. The teens left, the suit grabbed his food and dipped. Even the old man took his last handful of napkins and wandered out. By the time I called their number, they were the only ones left. The guy carried the trays over while she rolled herself to the corner booth. He slid in across from her then, without a word, started unwrapping burgers. Peeling the paper back, one after another, setting them in front of her like some kind of ritual. And then he started feeding her. Not like you'd feed a kid either. No gentle bites, no careful wiping of her mouth. He shoved the food at her, barely giving her time to chew before cramming in the next handful. Grease dribbled down her chin, bits of bun and lettuce stuck to her shirt, but she didn't seem to care. And the guy, he was enjoying it. I could see it in his face. The slight curl of his lips, the way his fingers lingered on her skin just a little too long. I don't know what the hell I was looking at, but it wasn't normal. Carlos nudged me. "Dude, we gotta clean that when they're done." "Yeah," I muttered. Pete walked out from the back, rubbing his eyes. "We closing up soon?" "Trying to." I nodded toward the booth. "They're taking their time." Pete followed my gaze, and his face twisted in disgust. "Jesus, just let 'em finish and get the hell out." It took them 10 minutes to finish the food. 10 minutes to devour what would have fed a family. The woman leaned back, lips glossy with grease, her breathing even heavier than before. The guy sat back too, watching her with something between admiration and hunger. Then he pulled something out of his pocket. A small black case. I don't know why, but every hair on my neck stood up. He opened it, revealing a syringe. Pete was already moving. "All right, time to go." The guy didn't even flinch. He just looked up at Pete, then back at the woman. She gave him a small nod. I don't know what the hell I was expecting, but it wasn't what happened next. The guy leaned over, rolled up her sleeve, and injected her. "What the hell are you doing?" Pete snapped. The guy didn't answer. The woman let out a deep, satisfied sigh. Pete grabbed the radio from his belt. "I'm calling the cops." The guy's expression didn't change, but his hand moved fast. Too fast. Before I even registered what was happening, he had a knife on the table. A long, thin blade, glinting under the fluorescent lights. Pete stopped mid-step. Carlos and I were frozen. The guy ran a finger along the blade, tilting his head slightly. "No need for that," he said, voice calm. "We were just leaving." He stood up, pocketed the knife, then helped the woman back onto her scooter. We didn't stop them. We couldn't. The door swung shut behind them, and just like that, they were gone. We locked the doors, called the cops anyway. But by the time they got there, the parking lot was empty. No sign of the guy, no sign of the woman. They ran the security footage, but for some reason, the angle made it hard to see what was in the syringe. They couldn't even get a plate number off the cameras outside. "Probably just insulin," one of the cops said. "Some people need help with that." But I don't think it was insulin. I don't know what was in that syringe, or why the woman looked so satisfied afterward. But I do know one thing. Whatever that guy was doing to her, whatever sick, twisted thing they had going on, it wasn't over. And somewhere out there, they were already looking for their next meal. I never really wanted to work fast food, but when you're broke in college and living off ramen, you take what you can get. It was the summer of 1997, and I had just finished my second year at a small college in upstate New York. Rent was due, my car needed gas, and my parents weren't exactly rolling in cash. So when I saw a now hiring sign at a Burger King just off the main strip in town, I filled out an application that same afternoon. They called me the next day. The manager, Rick, barely glanced at my form before handing me a uniform shirt and saying, "You're hired. Come in tomorrow at 4. That was it. No real interview, no questions, just a greasy handshake and a half-smoked cigarette dangling from his lips. I should have known then that this wasn't going to be your average summer job. Most of the crew were college kids like me. Jake, Tanya, Chris, and Erica. We were the night shift warriors, running the place while Rick spent most of his time chain-smoking out back or messing with the stock orders to cut costs. It was hard work. The fryers left burns on our arms. The grills were caked in old grease, and the heat in that kitchen was unbearable in the summer. But we stuck together. When the late-night drunks rolled in, yelling for Whoppers, or when the drive-through line wrapped around the building, we made it work. But the sanitation? That was a whole different story. Rick didn't believe in wasting food. If something could be reused, it was. If a bun was a little stale, toast it. If fries sat out too long, throw 'em back in the fryer. Meat patties sitting past the timer? Just flip 'em, no one'll notice. And those timers on the burger bins, the ones meant to tell us when food needed to be tossed, they were just for show. The first time I saw him reusing cooked beef from the trash, I nearly quit. But I needed the job. We all did. And then came the worms. It was a slow night about halfway through my shift. I had a 30-minute break, and one of the perks of working there was getting a free meal. Normally, I stuck to a basic cheeseburger, something simple, something I knew was fresh. But that night, I wanted something different. There was a new burger on the menu, a limited-time special with crispy onion rings, barbecue sauce, and ranch dressing. It sounded good, and for once I didn't want the same old thing. So I grabbed a fresh bun from the stack, slapped a patty on the grill, and waited. The smell of sizzling beef filled the kitchen, mixing with the fryer oil and stale lettuce. When it was ready, I stacked everything together. Patty, cheese, sauce, onion rings. It looked perfect. I took my first bite. And that's when I felt something move. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe a weird texture, maybe a string of melted cheese stretching in a way it shouldn't. Then I looked down at my burger. The bun was moving. Tiny pale things wriggled between the sauce and the bread. Little white larvae, squirming in the heat, crawling over the cheese, the beef, the onion rings. I gagged, spit out my bite, and nearly threw up right there in the kitchen. My stomach twisted as I realized what had just been in my mouth. "What the hell?" I yelped, holding the burger out like it was a ticking bomb. Chris and Tanya turned. "Dude, what?" Then they saw it. "Oh, ew." Tanya covered her mouth. Chris took a step back. "That is disgusting." I ran to the trash, dumped the burger, and grabbed a cup of water, trying to rinse out my mouth. My stomach churned. Had I actually swallowed any of those things? Rick heard the commotion and strolled over. "What's the problem?" I showed him the bun, pointing at the still-moving worms. "Look at this, man. These were on my burger." He barely glanced at it. Then he shrugged. "Just sesame seeds," he muttered. I blinked. "Are you serious?" "Yeah. Little white seeds." He picked up the bun and flicked one of the wriggling things onto the counter. "See?" It moved, it squirmed. It was very much not a seed. Chris shook his head. "Rick, that's not normal, dude." Rick rolled his eyes. "Look, food gets bugged sometimes. It happens. Just toss that batch of buns and keep working." He turned to leave. "Wait," I called after him. "How long have these buns been here?" Another shrug. "Couple of days, maybe a week. Who cares?" My stomach dropped. We threw out one bag of buns, but how many were already served? We didn't know. We didn't get a chance to find out either. Because not 10 minutes later, some drunk college guy came storming up to the counter. He was big, 6'3", built like a linebacker, wearing a Cornell hoodie and a backward cap. He had a half-eaten Whopper in his hand, and he was pissed. "Dude, what the hell is this?" he slurred, holding up the burger. I knew before he even said it. He held up the top bun and sure enough, worms, still moving. I braced myself for a full-on meltdown. Yelling, cursing, a demand for free food for life, maybe even a lawsuit. But instead, the guy just shrugged. "Yo, can I just get another one?" he asked. "No worms this time?" We stared at him. He stared back. "I'm serious, man, I'm starving." Chris and I exchanged a look. Tanya's face turned green. The dude was actually going to eat another burger, after biting into one full of live worms. Rick, of course, was happy to oblige. "Sure thing, bud. Fresh one coming up." I didn't eat anything from that place for weeks. That was my breaking point. I lasted 2 more weeks before quitting. And to this day, whenever I eat a burger, no matter where I am, no matter how clean the place is, I always check the bun. Because I learned something that summer. Some things don't belong in your food. And some people, they just don't care. I don't usually eat fast food before a big event, but that day, my stomach overruled my better judgment. It was a sweltering afternoon in June, and I was running on nothing but nerves and a cup of coffee. I had an important job interview in less than an hour, but between the traffic and the heat, I felt like I was about to pass out. I needed something, anything to eat, or I'd end up stammering through my answers like a fool. There was a Burger King just off the highway, tucked between a discount pet supply store and a nail salon. I'd passed by it 100 times but never stopped. The parking lot was half full, mostly with people hauling around big bags of dog food or leading their pets into the store next door. That should have been my first red flag. I don't trust restaurants that sit too close to places that smell like animal feed. But I was desperate. I pulled into a spot, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, and wiped the sweat off my face. My suit was too damn tight. I'd borrowed it from my cousin last minute and the sleeves barely reached my wrists. I hoped the interviewer wouldn't notice. As soon as I stepped out of my car, this smell hit me. Not the smell of burgers or fries. Something else. Something damp and sour. It was the kind of humid animal stink you get after a dog's been rolling in mud and left to dry in the sun. It clung to the air like wet fur. I looked around trying to pinpoint the source, but nothing seemed out of place. Just families eating at the outdoor tables, a couple of teenagers loitering by the entrance, and a man arguing with his kid near the drive-through menu. I hesitated. Maybe this was a mistake. But my stomach growled, and the thought of sitting through a 40-minute interview on an empty stomach was worse than whatever weird odor was wafting through the lot. I pulled open the door, and immediately regretted it. Inside, the smell was 10 times worse. The sharp, artificial scent of grease and fryer oil couldn't cover up the overpowering musk of wet dog fur. It was suffocating, thick in the air, like it had been soaked into the walls, into the floors, into the damn furniture. I gagged. The Burger King looked normal enough. Dingy yellow lighting, worn-out linoleum, a couple of kids running around while their parents ignored them. But the stench made my eyes water. I swallowed down the nausea and stepped forward, my shoes sticking slightly to the floor with each step. Then I saw her. She was impossible to miss. A heavy-set woman sat in the middle of the restaurant, wedged between 2 tables she'd pulled together to make room for the monstrous dog sprawled at her feet. The thing was massive, easily over 100 pounds, with matted fur that looked damp, or worse, greasy. I don't know what breed it was. Maybe part St. Bernard, part pit bull, all muscle and filthy. The woman was drenched in sweat, her face flushed red, and for some reason, she was pouring water all over herself. She lifted a large styrofoam cup over her head and let half the liquid splash onto her chest, before dumping the rest onto the tiled floor. Her dog immediately lapped it up. its thick tongue making disgusting wet slapping sounds as it drank. I made the mistake of locking eyes with her. She glared at me, her lips curling up like I'd just insulted her mother. "The hell you looking at?" she spat. I immediately broke eye contact and headed for the counter. Not my problem. I just wanted food. In and out. The girl at the register was young, probably still in high school, and she looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. She didn't even glance up as she asked for my order. "Just a Whopper and fries," I muttered. But before I could stop myself, I added, does it always smell like this in here?" The cashier's eyes flicked toward the woman and her dog, then back at me. She sighed. "The manager already told her she can't have her dog inside, but she won't leave." I nodded slowly. That's when I heard the chair scrape against the tile. The woman was getting up. "Shit. What did you say about my dog?" I turned slightly, keeping my hands relaxed, but my heart started beating faster. "I didn't say anything about your dog," I said carefully. She took a step forward. So did the dog. She jabbed a finger in my direction, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "You think he stinks, don't you? You think I don't take care of him?" I could hear the cashier go silent behind me. The entire restaurant was watching now. Do not escalate this. I forced a neutral smile. "Ma'am, I didn't mean—" Before I could finish, she hurled her entire drink at me. Cold, sticky liquid splashed across my suit, soaking into the fabric, dripping down my neck. For a second I didn't react. I was too shocked. Then I smelled it. Not water. It was soda, and that filthy dog had been drinking from the same cup. The moment the liquid hit me, the dog reacted. It lunged forward, snarling, baring its teeth. It wasn't just barking, it was attacking. The woman yanked the leash, but it was old, frayed, and I heard the fibers start to snap. People screamed. I stumbled back, my hands instinctively raised, and for the first time in my life I felt true, primal fear. That thing was going to maul me. I backed up so fast I almost tripped over a chair. The dog's jaws snapped inches from my thigh. The woman was shrieking, telling me I deserved this for bad-mouthing her baby. And that's when I bolted behind the counter. I didn't even think. 1 second I was in front of the register. The next I was behind it, standing next to the stunned employees. "Call the cops." The girl at the register was frozen, her eyes huge. The manager, a stocky guy in his 40s, came rushing out, already pulling his phone from his pocket. "Lady, get your damn dog out of my store," he bellowed. The woman grabbed the leash, jerking the beast back. It snapped at the air, foam dripping from its mouth. "He ain't hurt nobody. You people are overreacting." Sirens. I didn't even realize someone had called 911 until I heard the distant wail of approaching police cars. The woman's eyes darted toward the front windows. Then without another word, she yanked the dog toward the exit and stormed out. The second the door slammed shut behind her, the entire restaurant exhaled. I stood there, shirt clinging to me, skin sticky with soda, my hands still shaking. The manager clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, man?" I nodded, but honestly, I wasn't sure. All I knew was one thing. I would never eat at that Burger King again. I never thought I'd be the one to find a body at work. Burger King was never my dream job, but it was steady. The morning shifts were quiet, the people mostly decent, and I had a system. Get in, clock in, do my job, and leave. No extra drama, no unnecessary small talk, just a paycheck. It was my second to last week before leaving for a better job. The kind with benefits, stable hours, and no grease stains. I was counting the days. The morning was slow, mostly regulars. A few construction workers ordering double Whoppers at 9 a.m., an elderly couple splitting a coffee, and the usual handful of drive-through customers who barely made eye contact. I liked the early shift for that reason. Fewer people, less nonsense. Then she walked in. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, pushing a cheap umbrella stroller with a little boy inside while a slightly older girl clung to her arm. She looked exhausted. Not just tired, drained. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail and her clothes looked slept in. I'd seen plenty of struggling moms come through, and she didn't stand out. Not at first. She ordered a small meal for herself and 2 kids' meals. Her voice was soft, almost distant. I barely paid attention as I handed over the receipt and cup for the drink machine. Another customer stepped up, and I moved on. Just another transaction. Until the old lady came to the counter. She was one of our regulars. Sweet lady, always polite, part of the retirement home group that came in every week. She leaned in, voice hushed but urgent. "Excuse me, miss, I think something's wrong in the restroom." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "One of the stalls is locked. I knocked, but no one's answering. It's been a while." That wasn't unusual. People took their time. Sometimes too much time. But something in her voice made me uneasy. I turned toward my shift supervisor, Dana. She was already watching, her expression tight. Morning shifts were chill, but Dana had been working here long enough to sense when something was off. "I'll check it out," she said. I followed her, a bad feeling settling in my gut. The women's restroom was empty except for that one locked stall. Dana knocked. "Ma'am, you okay in there?" No answer. She knocked again. Harder. Nothing. We exchanged glances. The maintenance key was kept in the office. It was just a small metal tool that fit into the stall lock, meant for cases like this. Most of the time, it was just someone falling asleep or some kid playing around. Dana slid the key in and turned it. The door swung open. I don't know what I expected to see. Not that. The woman from earlier, the mother, was lying on the floor. Her body was slumped against the wall, legs bent awkwardly, a half-empty bottle of bleach next to her hand. Her lips were blue, her skin was too pale. For half a second I thought she was already dead. Dana gasped, stepping back. "Oh my God," I heard myself say. But my voice felt distant. Then, the kids. I turned so fast I nearly tripped. The little boy and girl were still at the table, happily munching on their fries, completely unaware. A cold chill ran through me. She did this while they were right there. Dana snapped out of it first. She rushed out of the bathroom, shouting for someone to call 911. I dropped to my knees beside the woman. She wasn't moving. I pressed 2 fingers to her neck, barely daring to hope. A pulse. Faint. But there. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed some paper towels, wet them in the sink, and wiped her face, trying to keep her here. Hey, can you hear me?" My voice cracked. "You have kids out there. Wake up." Her eyelids fluttered. A weak gasp. "Come on," I whispered. The next few minutes blurred. The paramedics arrived, pushing past startled customers and confused employees. They moved fast, working on her right there in the cramped bathroom. I heard words I didn't understand, saw equipment I'd never seen up close. Then, a miracle. She gasped, loud, desperate, a deep sucking breath like someone breaking the surface of water after drowning. I felt my whole body sag with relief. The kids. The little girl had noticed now. She was looking around like something was wrong. The boy was still oblivious. One of the paramedics took over and I stumbled out of the bathroom. I looked at the kids, their tiny hands sticky with ketchup, their faces bright with innocence. They had no idea how close they had just come to losing their mother. The rest of the day was a haze. The police came. The general manager gave statements. Some employees were crying. I didn't. I just felt tired. The woman survived. They said she'd be going to a hospital for psychiatric care. I never saw her again. I kept thinking about those kids, about how normal they'd seemed while their mother was dying just feet away. And then, I thought about how close I had come to finding a dead body instead. My last week at Burger King couldn't end fast enough. A few weeks later, something else happened. I wasn't working there anymore, but I still grabbed food sometimes. One night, my girlfriend and I stopped in for a quick bite. We sat in the corner, eating in comfortable silence when a man walked in. At first, he was just another customer. Then he started talking to himself. Loud, He muttered about needing to move to the North Pole. He clutched a small radio, whispering into it like someone was on the other end. I made brief eye contact, and that was my mistake. He locked onto me. He moved closer, sat at the table next to us, started talking, not to us, but to someone who wasn't there. The tension in the air shifted. The cashier called an order number. He claimed it was his, but it wasn't. When I corrected him, he snapped. "You Californians need to learn to open your damn mouths," he snarled, grabbing his food. He turned toward the exit but kept glaring at me. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I forced a smile. "Have a nice day." A pause. Then, he screamed at me, cursing, calling me names. The entire restaurant fell silent. Employees and customers stared. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just watched as he stormed out, still screaming through the window. I haven't gone back to that Burger King since. It's not the food, not the service. It's the feeling that lingers there. Something heavy, something wrong. Like ghosts that aren't really ghosts, just memories, the kind that never really leave you. I never liked sitting alone in public places, but that night I didn't have a choice. Burger King was nearly empty, just a couple of families finishing their meals and a few workers behind the counter. My mom had taken me there because she was too exhausted to cook, something that happened often back then. She told me to grab a booth while she ordered, so I slid into the seat by the window, picking at the paper from my straw. It was one of those quiet nights where everything felt slower, heavier. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the smell of grease clung to the air. I kept my head down, playing with the napkin dispenser, when I felt it. That strange awareness, like someone was watching me. I looked up just as the door swung open. A man stepped inside, and the moment he did, his head turned in my direction. Like he had walked in looking for something. Or someone. He wasn't homeless, but he had the look of someone who didn't have a stable place to be. His clothes were dirty, his jeans torn at the knees. He had an odd smell, something sour and stale, like sweat mixed with something else. Something rotten. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, shifting constantly. His stance was off. He rocked slightly on his heels like he couldn't stand still. Then he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was stretched too wide, his teeth slightly yellowed. The kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. I swallowed hard and glanced toward my mom. She was still at the counter waiting for our food, completely unaware. "Hi," I said, forcing a polite smile, hoping he'd just move on. He didn't. He stepped closer, blocking my side of the booth. Too close. "You heard about that little girl?" he asked, his voice low, raspy. I blinked, confused. "What?" "The one they found," he continued, eyes locked onto mine. "That girl. The one they said was tortured." I froze. I knew exactly what he was talking about. Everyone in town did. A girl, just a few years younger than me, had gone missing weeks ago. It had been on every news channel, every radio station. Then a few days ago they found her body. The details were horrific. And now this stranger was talking about her like it was exciting to him. I felt my stomach twist. "They say she screamed for hours," he said, his lips barely moving. I wonder what that sounded like. I wanted to leave, to run to my mom. But he was standing too close, his body angled just enough that I couldn't slip past him. His hands were still buried in his pockets, fingers moving underneath the fabric. I didn't know what he was holding, but I didn't want to find out. I swallowed hard. I don't know. His smile widened. "You look about her age," he mused. "You ever think about how fast someone can disappear just like that?" I gripped the edge of the table. My legs tensed, ready to move the second I got an opening. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mom turning around with the food tray in her hands. Her expression shifted the second she noticed him. "Hey," she called out sharply, her voice cutting through the silence. "What are you doing?" The man flinched. His eyes flicked to her, then back to me. For a second I thought he was going to stay, going to keep talking. But then he took a step back. Then another. Without a word he turned and walked out the door. My mom set the tray down so hard that the drinks nearly toppled over. "Who the hell was that?" I shook my head, still too shaken to speak. One of the workers had noticed too. A guy from behind the counter hurried out after him, calling for another employee to follow. I heard them talking about calling the cops, about making sure he didn't come back. But I knew they wouldn't find him. I knew, because I saw it in his eyes before he left. He wasn't finished. That should have been the end of it. But after that night, I started seeing him. Or at least I thought I did. A few days later, I was in the car with my mom, and I saw a man on a bike pass by. It could have been him. Same posture, same unsteady way of moving. But before I could get a good look, he disappeared down a side street. Another time at a small convenience store, I thought I saw him lingering near the back aisles. When I turned for a second and looked again, he was gone. Paranoia. That's what I told myself. But I never sat alone in public again. And I never went back to that Burger King. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. That stretched smile. Those hollow eyes. His voice, crawling into my ears like insects. "You look about her age." I woke up sweaty, heart pounding. The room was pitch dark, except for the faint orange glow of the streetlight outside my window. I forced myself to breathe, to calm down. It was over. He was gone. Except as I lay there staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching me. Days passed, but the unease didn't. It wasn't just that I thought I saw him. It was the feeling that he was always near. That same creeping sensation I'd felt in Burger King. The way my skin prickled like unseen eyes were crawling over me. I started looking over my shoulder more often, checking behind me when I walked home. I'd stop mid-step, pretending to tie my shoe, just to see if someone was following. Nothing. But I couldn't shake it. Then, one night, something happened that proved I wasn't just being paranoid. It was late, maybe 10 p.m., when my mom sent me downstairs to grab something from the car. We lived in a small apartment complex, the kind with a dimly lit parking lot that always smelled like asphalt and old oil stains. I pulled on a hoodie and slipped outside. The air was crisp, the street quiet. Most people were inside, settling in for the night. I reached the car and unlocked it, grabbing the grocery bag my mom had left behind. Just as I shut the door, a sound, not a loud one, not something obvious, just the faintest scrape of a footstep on pavement. I turned my head slowly. Across the lot, near the trees that lined the sidewalk, someone stood in the shadows. I couldn't see his face, but I didn't need to. My body knew. It was him. That same stance. Slightly unsteady. The same way he swayed like he couldn't keep still. I couldn't move. For a moment, we just stood there. Me frozen by the car, him lingering in the darkness, watching. Then, he took a step forward. Panic shot through me. I spun around and ran. I flew up the apartment stairs, heart slamming in my chest. The moment I got inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My mom looked up from the couch. "What's wrong?" I could barely speak. There was, outside. I turned to the window, half expecting to see him standing there looking up. But there was nothing. Just the still, empty parking lot. My mom didn't brush me off. She knew I wasn't the type to panic over nothing, and after what happened at Burger King, she was already on edge. She locked all the doors, checked the windows, even grabbed the phone to keep next to her in case we needed to call the cops. That should have made me feel safer. It didn't. Because the whole night, I kept hearing things. Soft rustling outside. A faint creak, like weight shifting against the stair railing. Every time I peeked through the blinds, there was nothing. But I knew. He was there, waiting. I stopped going out alone after that. My mom didn't let me, not even to take out the trash. I walked to and from school with my older brother, and if we had to stop somewhere, she'd always make sure we were together. Weeks passed, then a month, and slowly, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was over. Until the phone call. It was a Saturday night, and I was home alone. My mom had gone out with some friends, leaving me with a frozen pizza and the TV remote. The phone rang around 9:30 p.m. I grabbed it off the counter, expecting it to be my mom checking in. Hello? At first nothing, just silence. Then, a breath. A slow, raspy inhale, followed by a voice I knew all too well. You look about her age. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. My fingers clenched around the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Who is this? I managed to whisper, even though I already knew. A low chuckle. The sound of shifting, like someone adjusting their grip on the receiver. You think you're safe, don't you? He murmured. You're not. I slammed the phone down. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. My mind was screaming at me to do something, call my mom, call the cops, anything. But before I could even move, the phone rang again. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stood there staring at it, my pulse hammering against my ribs. It rang again, and again. Then, it stopped. Silence filled the apartment, thick and suffocating. I turned toward the window, and there, standing on the sidewalk across the street, was him. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, head tilted slightly like he was waiting. The streetlight flickered above him, casting his face in and out of shadow. That same smile. That same hungry look in his eyes. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I needed to call someone. Now, but before I could grab the phone, there was a sound that made my stomach drop. A soft metallic clink. The sound of a doorknob being tested. My front door. I ran. I grabbed the house phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. 911, what's your emergency? He's trying to get inside. I whispered harshly, my back pressed against the hallway wall. The man, he followed me. He's outside my door. Stay on the line, officers are on their way. I didn't dare move. I could still hear it, the doorknob rattling, followed by a soft knock. A mocking knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps, then silence. The police arrived 7 minutes later. By then, he was gone. They searched the area, took my statement, but I could see it in their faces. Doubt. No forced entry, no security cameras, no witnesses. And the phone call? It came from a payphone. The officer gave me the usual talk, keep doors locked, stay vigilant, call if I saw anything suspicious. But we all knew the truth. He would come back. And next time, I might not be so lucky. The cops didn't do much. They wrote their notes, asked if I had any known enemies, and told me to stay inside with the doors locked. Then they left. I sat on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the front door. My mind replayed the knock, the way he had tested the doorknob. I hadn't imagined it. This was real. And I knew. He wasn't done with me yet. When my mom got home, she freaked out. She wanted to stay calm for my sake, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She asked me 100 questions. Did I recognize his voice? Did I actually see him at the door? Had I ever seen him near our apartment before? I told her everything. By the time I was done, she was already pacing, gripping her phone. I'm getting you something for protection. Tomorrow. I didn't argue. The next day, she bought me pepper spray. She also told my school. My teachers were informed to keep an eye on me, and I wasn't allowed to walk home alone anymore. Not that I planned to. For a while, nothing happened. Days turned into weeks. I still felt uneasy, but he was gone. Or so I thought. It was a Saturday afternoon when I saw him again. My mom and I were at the grocery store. She was picking out vegetables and I was messing with my phone when a chill ran up my spine. That feeling. I turned my head, scanning the aisles, and there he was, standing at the end of the frozen food section, staring. My body locked up. He wasn't smiling this time. His face was blank, his eyes dark and unreadable, just watching me. I grabbed my mom's arm. "Mom!" By the time she looked, he was gone. I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw, and I knew this wasn't over. That night I couldn't sleep. Every noise in the apartment made me jump. I kept imagining him, standing outside my window, waiting. Then, I heard something. A faint, distant thud, from outside. I got up, heart pounding, and crept to the window. I peered through the blinds, and my stomach dropped. There was a bike, propped against a tree. The same kind I'd seen him riding before. I ran to my mom's room and shook her awake. She bolted upright. "What? What's wrong?" "He's outside." We called the cops. Again. By the time they arrived, the bike was gone. And so was he. After that, my mom wasn't taking any chances. She bought new locks, put a security bar on the door, told my brother to walk with me everywhere. And for a while, things were quiet. Until the Burger King incident. It had been 3 months since I first met him. 3 months since that night at the apartment. I started to believe maybe it really was over. Then one evening my mom was too tired to cook. So she took me to Burger King. It was like déjà vu. Same booth. Same paper straw wrapper I was absent-mindedly rolling between my fingers. Then the door opened. I looked up. And there he was. He walked in slowly. His eyes scanned the room, like he was looking for something. Or someone. Then his gaze landed on me, and his face lit up. Like he'd just found a long-lost friend. I couldn't move. He started walking toward me. One step, then another. I felt trapped. I knew if I ran, he'd follow. And then, my mom noticed him. She saw the way he was looking at me, the way my face had gone pale, and she snapped. She jumped up, stepping between us. "What the hell do you want?" His smile disappeared. His eyes widened, like he hadn't expected to be confronted. For the first time, I saw fear in his expression. Then he turned and bolted. The employees reacted fast. One of them ran after him, trying to get a good look. Another called the cops, but he was already gone. That was the last time I ever saw him. The police took everything more seriously after that. They asked real questions, checked the security cameras, but they never found him. And to this day, I don't know what he wanted, or what would have happened if my mom hadn't been there. I still think about him sometimes. The way he watched me. The way he spoke about that missing girl, like it excited him. And I wonder, how many other girls had he followed before me? And how many after? Because men like him, they don't just stop. I never should have opened my mouth. That's the first thing that comes to mind every time I think back to that night. It was the middle of summer, a few days after my 19th birthday, and I was out with my buddies doing what we did best, being young, reckless, and stupid. We were packed into Nathan's beat-up Toyota, passing around bottles, blasting music, and driving aimlessly around town, high on nothing but cheap booze and the thrill of being untouchable. At least that's how we felt. We ended up parking in a lot near the old rail yard, killing time, talking nonsense, and sneaking drags off a cigarette that had been passed around so much it barely held together. Time blurred, and before we knew it, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving us half drunk, half stoned, and fully starving. "Burger King," Nathan suggested, flicking the cigarette butt into the darkness. "Hell yeah," Drew chimed in. I wasn't even thinking. I was just along for the ride. The Burger King we picked was one of those standalone joints near the freeway, the kind that's open late but never really busy past midnight. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few cars, and when we rolled up to the drive-thru, we saw the dreaded sign. Drive-thru closed. Please order inside. Damn, Drew groaned. Whatever, let's just go in, I said, already unbuckling my seatbelt. Nathan pulled into a spot and we tumbled out of the car, making our way inside. The moment we stepped through the doors, we saw the bottleneck at the counter. A long-ass line stretching from the register to almost the door. And right at the front of it, holding everyone up, was her. She was big, not just overweight but towering, and she had this presence that demanded attention. She was waving her arms, jabbing a stubby finger at the teenage cashier, and talking loud enough for the entire damn restaurant to hear. This is ridiculous. She was practically screaming. I said no pickles. Why would I say no pickles if I wanted pickles? Do I look like someone who would lie about my allergies? Do I? The cashier, a skinny kid with acne, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Ma'am, I can get you a new sandwich, but you better, because I am not leaving until this is made right. I exchanged looks with my friends. Drew was already snickering and Nathan was shaking his head. She's been at it for 10 minutes, a guy behind us muttered under his breath. I was buzzed, and buzzed me thought he was the funniest guy in the world, and that's when I did something stupid. By the time we got to the front of the line, the woman had finally stepped aside, still fuming, waiting for her corrected order. The cashier looked like he was about to cry, and the kitchen staff was moving like their lives depended on it. That's when I opened my mouth. I leaned in, put on my most exaggerated apologetic voice, and said, "May I apologize on behalf of humanity for the irate snuffling of my heavy friend here?" Drew burst out laughing behind me. Nathan covered his mouth. A couple of guys in line snorted, but the cashier didn't laugh. The woman didn't either. Instead, she just stared at me, her face turning a deep, blotchy red. For a split second, I thought she was about to explode, to start shrieking, to throw a drink in my face, to swing on me. But she didn't. She just stood there, breathing heavy, smiling. Then she pulled out her phone. I thought she was texting her husband. I was wrong. She was calling him. We got our food, sat down in the farthest booth from her, and started tearing into our burgers. I was still riding the high of my insult, feeling like the king of the world. But every time I glanced over, she was watching us. She wasn't eating. She wasn't mad anymore either. She just had that same smug grin on her face, whispering into her phone. I should have left right then and there. But I didn't. And by the time we stepped outside, it was too late. The moment the door swung shut behind us, we heard it. That one, right there. I turned just in time to see her, standing near the curb, pointing directly at me. And then I saw him. A man stepping out of a parked black sedan. A huge man. And he was holding a gun. Time slowed. I saw the gold glint of a wedding ring wrapped around his thick fingers, gripping the pistol so tight his knuckles turned white. I didn't even hear what he was shouting. All I saw was the barrel, aimed dead at my face. And then it was pushing into my forehead. I was shaking so hard, my legs barely held me up. "Get on your knees," he roared. "You don't deserve to die on your feet." I fell, not knelt, fell, and that's when it happened. I pissed myself. I don't remember the moment it started, but suddenly, I felt it, hot and wet, spreading down my legs, soaking into my jeans. I wanted to beg, but my throat had locked up. I wanted to run, but my legs had gone numb. I was going to die. Right there in a Burger King parking lot, soaked in my own piss, staring down the barrel of a gun. And then I heard it. "Cops." The woman's voice had changed. She sounded scared now. I felt the gun lift from my forehead, and when I finally dared to look up, I saw them. Him and her scrambling into their car, peeling out of the lot. The moment their taillights disappeared, I collapsed completely, sucking in ragged, shaking breaths. A few minutes later, the sirens arrived. And my friends? They were gone. They'd left me. The cops drove me home. I had to explain everything while sitting in my own soaked jeans, humiliated beyond words. My parents freaked out, but not because I almost got shot. No, because I'd been drinking. I was grounded for a month, but honestly, I didn't leave the house for a week anyway. And after that night, I never cracked a joke at a stranger's expense again. Because you never know who's just one phone call away from killing you. I never wanted this job. I applied because I needed the money. Simple as that. I was still in high school, and while most kids spent their weekends getting wasted or screwing around, I was here, grilling frozen patties and scrubbing floors at King's Grill, our town's sorry excuse for a fast food joint. It wasn't even my first choice. I tried getting hired at the movie theater, but they weren't taking anyone. The hardware store wasn't hiring either. My mom knew the general manager here, and before I knew it, I was on the schedule. 25 hours a week, flipping burgers and taking orders from people who treated me like I didn't exist. At first, I thought the worst part would be the work itself. Grease burns, angry customers, long shifts that made my whole body ache. But I was wrong. This place was cursed. Not officially, of course. There were no ghost stories or urban legends about it. But from the moment I started, everything went to hell. My first shift was supposed to be easy, just a 4-hour closing shift to get used to things. I'd shadow another worker, maybe wipe some tables. Nothing too crazy. Instead, I spent my first night cleaning up projectile vomit. One of the cooks, a guy named Chris, had been feeling sick all day. But instead of calling off, he powered through it. That was until he exploded. He didn't make it to the bathroom. Hell, he didn't even make it out of the kitchen. 1 second he was at the grill and the next, blur. It went everywhere. On the grill, on the fryer, on the prep table, even in the sink. A disgusting mix of half-digested burger meat, soda, and stomach acid. I gagged the moment I saw it. The stench alone was enough to make my eyes water, but my manager, Doug, just clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "Welcome to fast food, kid." And we stayed open. I had to clean it up between making fries and taking orders. We didn't even shut down the kitchen, just wiped off the grill and kept flipping patties. I tried not to think about the fact that the same sink people washed their hands in had just been filled with someone's puke. A few weeks later, something even worse happened. The soda and ice storage drain under our fridge stopped working. At first, we thought it was just clogged, so we pulled the fridge away from the wall to check it out. Big mistake. The moment we moved it, a wave of stench hit us. It was like raw sewage mixed with death. One of the guys, Ryan, turned green and gagged. The drain was full of this thick, gelatinous brown sludge. It wasn't just normal gunk. It was alive. It had bubbles. It moved. Like it was breathing. I swear when I got closer I saw something wriggling inside of it. Doug, being the genius he was, handed me a pair of gloves and said, "Scoop it out." I looked at him like he was insane. Scoop it out? With what, my hands? He tossed me a plastic spoon. I wanted to quit right then and there. But I needed the money, so I held my breath, reached in and started pulling the stuff out. It was warm. I don't know how. The fridge was cold, the drain should have been cold, but the sludge was warm, and slimy, and thick. By the time I finished, my hands felt contaminated even through the gloves. We poured bleach down the drain, hoping it would fix whatever was wrong. It didn't. A few days later, the drain was clogged again, and this time the sludge was darker. The next major incident was the one that almost made me quit. Some kid, God help him wherever he is now, had explosive diarrhea all over our dining area. I don't know how he did it, but he managed to hit 3 tables, a dozen chairs, and a solid 80 square feet of wood flooring. It was like a crime scene, except instead of blood it was, well, you get the idea. And just like before, we stayed open. Doug handed me a mop and said, "Make it quick." I looked at him, then back at the mess. "You want me to clean this while people are eating?" He shrugged. "What else are we going to do? Close?" I felt sick just thinking about it. People were still eating their burgers, their fries, completely ignoring the fact that the air was thick with the scent of human waste. I mopped as fast as I could, but the smell didn't go away. It sank into the floor. For days it lingered, soaked into the wood like a rotten memory. And no matter how many times I washed my hands, I swore I could still smell it on me. But the worst, the absolute worst, was the rats. Our restaurant closed for a few weeks every winter because business slowed down. One of the supervisors, Dave, found a rat problem in the walk-in freezer just before we shut down. Instead of dealing with it, he just shut the door. Didn't set traps, didn't call pest control, just locked them in and left. When we reopened, I was the one who found them, about 30 dead baby rats. Their little bodies were twisted and stiff, their fur matted with filth. And then there was her, the mother rat. She was curled up in the corner, ribs poking through her fur. At first I thought she was dead too, but when I reached down to pick her up, she woke up, and she attacked me. She sank her teeth into my hand and started climbing up my arm, biting the whole way. I screamed and tried to shake her off, but she wouldn't let go. Every time I hit her, her teeth ripped deeper into my skin. Finally, I slammed her against the freezer wall. She dropped to the floor, dazed, and I stomped. Over and over and over again. When I finally stopped, she was a broken mess of blood and guts. My hand was torn open. 19 stitches, tetanus shot, 72 hours in the hospital. And after all that, Doug still wanted me to come in for my next shift. That was the moment I knew. This place was poison. It wasn't just bad luck. Something was wrong here. Something that made people sick, that made drains rot, that made rats suffer and fight to survive. And I was done. I quit the next day. But sometimes when I pass by that building, I swear, I still smell the rot. I was exhausted. It had been one of those shifts where everything felt like it dragged on forever. Orders were coming in slow, the fryers kept acting up, and half the crew was either stoned, half asleep, or straight up useless. Working at Burger King in the middle of the night meant dealing with a lot of things. Drunk customers, homeless people sneaking in to use the bathroom, employees slacking off. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw that night. I was about halfway through my shift, just trying to push through the fatigue, when I remembered the bathroom check. It was one of those mindless tasks. Walk in, make sure everything looked decent, sign off on the cleaning sheet, and get out. I grabbed the clipboard, tucked a pen behind my ear, and made my way over. The second I stepped inside the women's restroom, I felt something was off. It wasn't just the usual fast food bathroom smell. There was something stale in the air, a sharp chemical odor that made my nose wrinkle. I sighed, thinking some customer had probably left something disgusting behind. Then I saw it. A pair of legs sticking out from under the stall. At first, my brain didn't register what I was looking at. I thought maybe someone had passed out drunk. Not unusual, but something about the way she was lying there, too still, made my stomach twist. I stepped closer, my shoes scuffing against the tiles. "Hey," I called out, keeping my voice steady. "You okay in there?" No answer. A cold feeling crept up my spine. I bent down slightly, trying to get a better look under the stall. The girl was slumped forward, her long blonde hair partially covering her face. Her hand was limp, fingers barely curled. That's when I saw her lips. Blue. My stomach dropped. I took a shaky step back, then turned and bolted out of the bathroom. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was in my throat. I practically ran into Jess, my shift supervisor. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, frowning. I swallowed, trying to catch my breath. "There's a girl in the bathroom. I think she's overdosing." Jess's eyes widened, but she didn't move right away. I could tell she was processing what I'd just said, trying to decide if I was serious. Then she muttered, "Shit," and rushed past me into the restroom. I ran to the office and called 911. The dispatcher kept asking me if the girl was still breathing. I didn't know. I wasn't about to go back in there alone to check. I waved down Marcus, one of our cooks. I need you to check if she's breathing. He gave me a hell no look, but when I told him the paramedics needed to know, he reluctantly walked into the restroom. Not even 3 seconds later, he stumbled back out, pale as hell. Dude, he said, shaking his head. She's barely breathing. Her face. He stopped, swallowing hard. I don't think she's gonna make it. When the paramedics arrived, they needed to get into the stall, but the door was locked from the inside. Can you kick it in? I asked one of them. We could, he said, but that'll take time. Can you climb over? I hesitated. Then I nodded. Using the sink as leverage, I hoisted myself up onto the stall divider. It was shaky, but I managed to get to the top. Carefully, I swung my leg over, making sure I didn't land on the girl's body. As I dropped down, I finally saw her face up close. Her eyes were open, wide, terrified. She was awake, but barely there. Sweat clung to her forehead and her breathing was shallow, erratic. For a moment, I just stared at her, frozen. She looked so close to death. I forced myself to move, unlocking the stall door. The paramedics rushed in, pushing me aside. I backed up against the sink, watching as they pulled out a small nasal spray. Narcan, one of them said. Let's go. They tilted her head back and sprayed it into her nostril. At first, nothing happened. Then, she gasped. Her body jerked violently, as if someone had just pulled her back from the edge of a cliff. She started blinking rapidly, her breath coming in sharp, ragged gulps. One of the paramedics held her up. You're okay, he said, voice calm but firm. You're gonna be okay. She looked around, eyes wild and full of panic. Then she saw me, and I will never forget that look. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper. Like she had seen the other side. And it had almost swallowed her whole. They took her to the hospital. I never saw her again after that night. A few days later, her manager came in and confirmed she was fired. Not a surprise. We had a zero-tolerance policy when it came to drugs. But then, about a week later, she came back. She didn't come inside. She just stood outside the drive-through window, waiting until I was the one taking orders. When I slid the window open, she looked at me for a long time. Then she asked, "What did I look like?" I hesitated. I could have told her the truth. That she looked like she was on the verge of death. That her eyes had been empty, like she had already started slipping away. But I didn't. Instead, I forced a small smile and said, "You just looked asleep." She nodded slowly. Then she walked away. That should have been the end of it. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, when the restaurant was empty and quiet, I'd remember her face. The way she stared at me from the bathroom floor. That hollow, haunted look. Like she had seen something on the other side. And I swear to God, for just a second, I think it saw me too.